Hollywood has always known what it wanted from women. A certain softness, a willingness to be arranged by the lighting, by the costume department, by the studio's idea of what female beauty was supposed to look like and what it was supposed to do. The system worked because most women, faced with the machinery of it, eventually complied. The ones who didn't were broken or discarded, or simply worn down until compliance looked like the only remaining option. And then there was Bette Davis, who looked at the entire system, understood exactly what it wanted from her, and declined. Ruth Elizabeth Davis was born on April 5, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts, the elder of two daughters in a family that fell apart early. Her father left when she was 7. Her mother, Ruthie, was a woman of formidable energy and absolute conviction that her daughter was destined for something extraordinary. She was right, though the path to extraordinary was considerably more difficult than either of them anticipated. Bette discovered acting as a teenager and pursued it with the kind of focused, almost aggressive determination that would define her entire career. She studied, she worked, she developed a technique while other aspiring actresses were still developing a look. When she arrived in Hollywood in 1930, signed by Universal, and then quickly dropped, the industry's verdict was swift and nearly unanimous. She had no sex appeal. Her eyes were too large. Her manner was too direct. She did not move through a room the way the studios needed women to move, with a certain yielding quality, a suggestion of availability, a willingness to be looked at without looking back too hard. Bette Davis looked back. She always looked back, and the looking contained something that made people uncomfortable because it was entirely too intelligent and entirely too unimpressed. Warner Brothers signed her, and the battle began. Jack Warner ran his studio with the conviction of a man who believed he owned the people on his payroll, their time, their image, their choices, their careers. He handed Bette Davis scripts she found beneath her abilities and expected her to perform them with gratitude. She performed them with professionalism because she was constitutionally incapable of doing work badly, but she made her feelings about the material known in terms that Warner found increasingly difficult to ignore. She was not polite about mediocrity. She was not strategic about her contempt. She said what she thought, clearly and without softening, which was not a quality the studio system had much use for in its female stars. The roles that changed everything came in spite of Warner, not because of him. Of Human Bondage in 1934, on loan to RKO, gave her Mildred Rogers, a vicious, manipulative Cockney waitress who destroys a man who loves her with a thoroughness that is genuinely frightening. It was not a sympathetic role. It was not a beautiful role. It was the kind of role studios handed to character actors, not to women they were trying to make into stars. Bette Davis took it and gave a performance so ferociously real that critics ran out of polite vocabulary and started reaching for words like devastating and unforgettable. The Academy did not nominate her, in what became one of the most discussed snubs in Oscar history. The public was outraged enough that a write-in campaign on her behalf nearly succeeded. She won for the first time the following year for Dangerous, a role that she herself considered inferior to Of Human Bondage, and she accepted the award with the graciousness of a woman who understood the politics of the moment and the private conviction of someone who knew exactly which performance deserved the recognition. She won again in 1938 for Jezebel, a film that Warner had rushed into production to head off her desire to play Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. She was not Scarlett O'Hara. She was something more interesting, a woman whose willfulness was her defining characteristic and whose punishment for that willfulness was the engine of the film's drama. She played it with her eyes open. But the war with Warner Brothers was escalating. She was being handed scripts she found insulting. She turned down roles. She was suspended. She was threatened. And in 1936, she did something that had never been done before and has rarely been done since. She simply left. She went to England and signed with a British producer named Toplitz for 2 films. Warner Brothers sued. The case went to court, and the court ruled against her. She was ordered back to Hollywood, back to her contract, back to the system she had tried to escape. She went back, but the lawsuit, though she lost it legally, changed the balance of power in ways that mattered. She had demonstrated something the studios feared above almost anything else, that she was ungovernable, that she could not be managed by the usual methods, not by flattery, not by threats, not by the slow suffocation of bad roles. She would keep fighting, keep working, keep producing performances of such undeniable quality that the studio could not afford to waste her, even when they desperately wanted to. The advertisement she placed in Variety and The Hollywood Reporter in 1936 while in England was one of the most extraordinary acts of professional defiance in Hollywood history. Wanted by Bette Davis, a job, it read, simply with her agent's contact information beneath it. A major studio star, under contract, publicly advertising for work. It was outrageous. It was funny. It was completely in character for a woman who had decided that the rules applied to people who needed them, and she did not need them. By the early 1940s, she was the highest paid woman in America. She had become, despite Warner and because of herself, the dominant actress of her era, not because she was beautiful in the studio's preferred way, but because she was something far more valuable and far more rare. She was true. Every character she played carried the full weight of her intelligence, her specificity, her refusal to simplify or sentimentalize. She played women who were flawed, selfish, cruel, complicated, ambitious, petty, magnificent, women who existed in the full spectrum of human behavior rather than the narrow band that Hollywood considered acceptable for female characters. 10 academic award nominations across a career that spanned 6 decades, the first person in history to reach that number, a record that stood for decades. And yet, the nominations are almost beside the point, because Bette Davis was never really in competition with other actresses. She was in competition with herself, with the standards she had set in Of Human Bondage, in All About Eve, in Now Voyager, in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane. And she met that standard with a consistency that has no parallel in American cinema. She never became easy to work with. She never became diplomatic. She never learned to flatter the people she didn't respect, or to pretend that bad work was acceptable, or to be grateful for the condescension of an industry that had spent years trying to make her something smaller than she was. She smoked, she drank coffee by the gallon, she had opinions about everything and shared them without being asked. She was married 4 times, divorced 4 times, and devoted to her daughter with a complicated ferocity that her daughter, B.D. Hyman, would eventually write a book about, a book that Bette Davis considered a betrayal of the deepest kind. She died on October 6, 1989, in Neuilly-sur-Seine, France, at the age of 81, having survived breast cancer, a stroke, and the indignity of Hollywood's habit of forgetting their women the moment they cease to be young. She was still working at the end, still turning up on set, still bringing more to the material than the material deserved, still refusing to be anything other than exactly what she had always been. "Fasten your seatbelts," she had said, through the mouth of a character in a film, and the line had become hers because it was hers. It had always been hers. It was the announcement she had been making to the world since she was a girl in Massachusetts who decided that she was not going to be arranged or softened or made into something easier to look at without flinching. She was Bette Davis, and if that was going to be a bumpy night for everyone around her, then everyone around her was simply going to have to hold on.